Thank you
Okay.
very, very much for, allowing me to talk to you, for having this interview, for having this conversation. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. It gives me an opportunity to just talk about things which I get excited about.
I would be very much interested to see what you have learned over the years, all the different knowledge that you have gained, and with the especially practical knowledge that you have gained. What would you say are the main points for you right now, looking back also?
Well, I do think that having a psychotherapy background is very useful. At the same time, I do realize that for many people who are trained and qualified psychotherapists, it's a big thing to make the shift. After all, you have, for most psychotherapists, 7 years that you've committed to your training, an awful lot of money as well. It's a very financially, a huge financial commitment. And then to find, because if we really look at it, we have to rethink almost everything of our psychotherapeutic training to take on what we're talking about. So it's not easy to make the shift. And I do recognize this, and I work with many people who have a psychotherapy background about how to make the shift, because you have to let go of an awful lot of things that you have come to believe are the way it is. And, one is, I'm a psychotherapist. I've perhaps been working for 10, 15, 20 years as a psychotherapist, and I suddenly realize I haven't dealt with my trauma.
Oh, yes.
Big thing to take on. But I do think it's, certainly for me, it's been hugely beneficial to have a psychotherapy background. I do think it's perfectly possible to become an IoPT practitioner without it, but I think you have quite a lot to learn, to catch up on the basic issues of how to relate to people, how to hold a group, how to understand things about projections that are put on you. All women IoPT practitioners are vulnerable to having mothers projected onto them, the mother projected on, and all male practitioners of IoPT are in danger of having the perpetrator, the male perpetrator projected on them. We have to be very aware of these things. So I think there's quite a lot of things that the person who doesn't have a psychotherapy background has to think about and has to learn and come to terms with. And sometimes, I know this, some students have said to me, I think I'd like to go and do a counseling training. Yeah, fine, why not? But you'll find it difficult. On occasion, one or two have said, I want to do a psychotherapy training. Fine, do it. But you'll find it difficult because your teachers won't want to hear what you're going to tell them.
Wow.
It's very interesting. The institute where I trained in London, very reputable institute, and I look at their postgrad events. Very rarely is the one with trauma in the title, very rarely. Yeah, and I see in the psychotherapy world them addressing all sorts of interesting topics, psychotherapy and racism, psychotherapy and misogyny, psychotherapy and whatever it else. I think if you understand trauma in the way that we do, these other topics fade away because they're not so influential. If you get a clear, healthy eye psyche, racism and misogyny are not part of your world. They just are not. You cannot be a racist if you are in your healthy eye. You cannot be a misogynist if you are in your healthy eye. So all these attendant topics fade away when we really think in IoPT terms. That's what I think anyway. And I think one of the biggest challenges for us who are involved in IoPT informed, as Franz has talked about, which I think is a wonderful phrase. The biggest challenge for us is, how do we live in the world? How do we live in the world as it is? How do we, on a daily basis, we go out of our home, we go to our town, we do our shopping, we do whatever it is, we read the news. How do we relate to these dynamics as they happen in the world? How do we relate to people every moment of our day, when we understand that people out there don't understand perpetrator-victim dynamics and very often are operating primarily from perpetrator-victim dynamics? This is a huge challenge. So Franz talks about I think there are various markers for the end success, if you like, of IoPT work, one of which he's defined as living a good life. And he's done a whole lot of thinking about what that means. I have too, living a good life. But you can't, even as much as you live a good life in your own space, you still have to go out and relate to the world and find a way of relating to other people, find a way of not getting caught in the perpetrator-victim dynamics. It's a big challenge. But of course, the clearer you are in your own psyche, the clearer you are in yourself, the easier that is, or because the easier it is to spot it, and then you can sort of sidestep, step aside. We are at a stage where I think collectively we cannot avoid trauma, and there's some really good people doing some good work trying to understand trauma. Yes, I know these people are all trying to understand trauma. My only problem is I don't think they've quite got it, because I think they're missing what we have. And this I find a challenge, because as somebody said on the Facebook thing, really the best thing we can do is like the Zen saying, chop wood and fetch water. Just get on with our work. Just do what our work is. But at the same time, I see all these wonderful people coming together to talk about trauma. And I think, well, if they don't think in terms of this basic trauma of the child not being wanted while in the womb, the trauma happens in the womb, somehow they're not there yet. And also, I think the understanding of perpetrator-victim dynamics, that is another big thing. The trauma biography, the major things that Franz has come up with, definition of trauma, because actually it's very hard to find other people putting a really good bullet point kind of definition on what trauma actually is. The only diagnostic category in the DSM-4, which is what most psychotherapeutic people refer to for diagnosis, the only one that has the word, even now, that has the word trauma in it is post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's most often about later trauma.
Exactly.
And it doesn't really give you a definition of what trauma actually is. It doesn't. It talks about post-trauma symptomatology. It doesn't say this is what trauma is. This is what Franz has done. And I don't think anybody else has really done that in the clear way that he has. So he's given us a definition of trauma. He's given us the trauma biography. He's given us the understanding of perpetrator-victim dynamics, the understanding of survival strategies, and the understanding of what an identity is. These are major contributions to the field that I cannot think but these people who are meeting in Boston, the next big event that's happening in America with all these wonderful people, I cannot think that they would not benefit from understanding some of what Franz has put together.
Yeah, because that is also what I am missing when I attended one or two of these conferences. They never go deep enough for me. They only, for me, they touch the surface.
Yes. And of course, the other thing I understand is, people like Bessel van der Kolk, who has spent his life trying to understand trauma, starting from the Vietnam War, as far as I understand it, working with war veterans from Vietnam, which was a terrible event. But I don't know if I don't know. I don't know. It's not that I think we need their recognition. It's that I think we have something to offer. That if they got it, would really enhance their own work and their own thinking and their own theorizing as well. That's what I think anyway. But we can't. But we need to acknowledge the existence of trauma first. We live in challenging times on all sorts of different levels, and I think we have a lot to offer. But I do think that I think we also have to, as a community, IoPT community, I think we do have to focus on ourselves a bit first. I think we have to focus on ourselves in terms of thinking about quality of practice, how we do the work, making sure that we are doing the work in a good way. How can we hold that? And also, how can we think about ethics and values? It's not enough to just say that one of our principal values is the autonomy of the person. We still have to think about how we behave to our clients and to the general public and to each other as well, how we are relating to each other. So I think we have quite a bit of internal work to do as a community while we are looking to be more influential out in the world. And I don't think we can do that second one without actually spending some time thinking about the first, thinking about quality of practice. It's one of the things I'm very interested in as a psychotherapist. So I started thinking, how can I teach more about how to think about the intention that people set? So people set an intention. We don't tend to think terribly much about it, but actually the work that follows is in order to resolve the intention. So we have to keep thinking about, what does this intention mean? So I'm doing these little 3-day seminars, practitioner seminars. And this year I decided to do one on, let's look at the intention. So I have privately done a little bullet point list of different types of intention. So there's the question intention, there's the I want intention, there's what I call the Ruppert intention, I, da, and da, whatever that is. And I started to think, what are these different types of intentions saying, and how can we as practitioners right at the beginning think, this intention is an affirmation, and what does that mean? If this intention is an affirmation, what's going to be the result? What's going to come out of it with this form of intention? So I'm very interested in looking at these more specific elements of how we work. The individual session, for example, has been a major concern of mine right back from when I was doing family constellations, because immediately I looked at these great big events that Hellinger was doing, and I thought, this is all very well, but how are we going to do this one-to-one? Because the reality is probably 70% of people are not going to come to a group because it's far too threatening and frightening, and a repetition of their family. This is the anticipation, is my experience in this group is going to be a repetition of my experience in my family for many people. And I still don't think in the IoPT world we are paying enough attention to looking at how do we facilitate a one-to-one session. Awful lot of people doing it, but I still don't think as a community we're looking enough at how we do it. It's one of my passions as well.
So to your first point on how to create the intention, this is what I realized for my own process, because I always observed people's work and what I liked and what I didn't like, and then also why did I had here such a great outcome personally, for me at least, a great outcome, and why was this one self-encounter sometimes a complete disaster. So I modified the way I created my intention, not only verbally, but mostly emotionally. With what type of emotions did I get in? And also how honest was I to myself as well? And then now I'm at a point where I'm starting to not play, but doing my own kind of research, with what type of intention. Just the other day, I used one where I had the intention, but I used different words. The only word I used out of the original intention was my I. And I told the group up front, you know, in the intervision group, so let me try this one out, you know, because I also wanted to see, would it work? How would it work? And it was a great work, you know. But usually we, you know, theoretically are not allowed to do so because that the rule is set in a different way. But that's quite interesting.
I don't think that we are yet at the end of discovering the best way to do the work. I think we are still in the process of this. I think there's still more we have to understand. And I hear what you're saying is that you, as a person doing your own work, is thinking about how you set your intention. I'm interested in the practitioners thinking about how people have set their intentions. Because the one thing I understand is that when we set an intention, when we have the impulse to do a process, already this is very stimulating in ourselves. And when we set the intention that we set always comes, of course, from the healthy part of us, but it's also imbued with survival strategies. It must be. Because we're always juggling this situation of how can I take a step forward and feel safe? And so it's always going to be a tension between the healthy impulse and the survival. Whoa, this is going to be too much and too scary. And I think we as practitioners need to understand that and see this tension playing out as it plays out in the process. I'm really interested in thinking about that with practitioners. Most of the work that I do now actually is with practitioners, is supervision support groups with practitioners. And I do, I experiment with them really about, all right, so if we look at the intention, how can we perhaps, after we've done the work, we have an agreement to talk about the work after the work. That's what the particular group is contracted with each other for. Of course, the person, if it's very personal and very triggering, they can go and have a cup of tea. And then I invite the practitioner to do on the board a mind map about the intention. Put the intention here, then underneath that is intention that is represented. So I want to live a peaceful life. That's the intention. I want peaceful. That's the sub-intention. And so we go on from there and we look at, so what can we say about this intention? Let's put it here. And we create these interesting mind maps. And I think this is very informative to start to help practitioners to think in these terms, about our work. Because the process is a process to explore something very specific, and the outcome must refer back to this intention. So what have we been doing all the time? So I'm interested in this this sort of stuff. That
sounds very, very interesting. And what I would be curious now to understand is, from your perspective, I'm not, let me call it IoPT practitioner wish list, you know, but the things where you say, these things for now are really important to me if you want to be, or if you want to go into the route of being an IoPT practitioner.
Well, I do still run what I call an education course. I call it an education course for a reason. I don't like the word training because it always reminds me of training dogs to sit and roll over and that sort of thing. And I think that training is a little bit along the lines of, this is what I do and I'm going to teach you to do what I do. Whereas I think what I'm more interested in is teaching people to think for themselves. And to think, why am I doing this? Why do I, in this moment, suggest we bring in a representative for the mother? And not just to do it randomly. I'm much more interested in that. So I run an education course. And in that course, there's absolutely no assumption that anybody is going to become a practitioner. I'm not interested in only working in that way. I'm interested in education, all of us. Anybody. This is why I brought out the little book, Zurück mein Ich, I think it's called.
Yes.
Yes.
It's amazing.
This is because this material and theory is for anyone. So I run this education course, and I say to my students, I think the one thing that would be really helpful for you is to become part of a peer group.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I've been thinking about that recently, and I think I have certain thoughts about peer groups, because I think in the peer group, if everybody is a member of a peer group or an intervision group, you mentioned an intervision, whatever you want to call it, but it's a group where you meet with other people who understand the language and the ideas. And I think it's a group where you can go and deal with, if you've had a difficult process, personal process, difficult personal process, you can talk it through with your colleagues and find some perhaps better resolution. You can, of course, practice doing little processes with each other. But one of the things that concerns me slightly is that from what I hear, that is what most people are doing in their peer groups.
Yes.
And I think there's many more things that we perhaps should be thinking about doing in our peer groups. One is reading the texts together and discussing the theory, reading one text maybe, and thinking about, well, this Franz is saying this here, what's he actually mean, and what's the implication for that in how I work. That's one thing, I think. I also think that setting up a peer group invites, I think keep them small, about 6 or 7 max, is inviting people to come together to exist in the time of the peer group according to IoPT principles of respect and valuing each other and valuing the community as a whole. And, but that's probably understood. That's probably what most people would say. Yes, that's understood. I think bringing in work problems, setting supervision intentions, why not? I have a problem with this client, I'm going to set an intention about that. Of course, it so often comes back to a personal issue.
Yeah.
I used to think this when I was a Gestalt supervisor also. I used to think it's not about sorting the client out, it's about sorting out why this person can't work with the client. That's always been my focus of supervision, is never the client. It's always the person, the practitioner. But there are 2 other things that I actually think could very valuably, I don't know if that's a proper word, but be of great value for people in peer groups to think about. One is the thinking about, because we don't have an accreditation procedure, I'm not going to talk about the licenses that Franz has issued. We don't have an accreditation procedure, and I think that's good, because our definition of identity is something that comes from within. It's not an outsourcing onto someone else's opinion of me. And accreditation is exactly that.
Yeah.
So I think peer groups, if could become an environment where one member of a peer group says, I think I'm getting ready to be able to practice. Can I talk about that with you and get feedback from you? Yeah. And so that our ability to practice, to be a practitioner of quality comes from a collaborative conversation within the peer group.
That's a very
so
nice
I don't just decide to start working with clients, but I actually talk it through with my colleagues in the peer group and get feedback, honest, genuine feedback from them about it. And then the business of becoming a practitioner becomes something with collaborative support and collaborative input. That's one thing I think would be a very good thing for people to do, not just have to do that or think about that on their own.
Yeah.
I talk to students who say, oh, I don't know if I'm fit to practice, blah, blah. I would say, go to your peer group, talk it through with them, get feedback from them about how you are and discuss it with them. So that's one thing. I think the other thing we can do in peer groups is deal with ethics. Issues of ethics. So, for example, if someone has a not good experience with a practitioner, they can go to their peer group and say, I had a difficult experience with this practitioner, blah, blah, blah. The group together can come up with a way in which, instead of it just becoming an event where I can complain about someone, we can actually find a solution.
That is very
The
nice.
group together can think, what would be a way that you could take this forward? So the most obvious way to take it forward is to suggest that the person go back to the practitioner and say, could we please have a conversation? There was something I was not happy about that happened. And I would like to think that all IoPT practitioners would be willing to have such a conversation if somebody was not happy with what they were doing. That to me is the most, probably the most effective and probably the most common solution that a group might come to, and say to the person, well, we would support you to go and talk to the practitioner, see if you can have a meeting. Even if you like, as a member of your peer group, I'll come with you and I'll be a mediator and be a support for you while you talk with this practitioner. I think we can do great things in peer groups with these issues, because make no mistake, these issues are they already are there in our community. I hear
absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They are already here. And perhaps if you doing even this conversation here as a recorded conversation can get out there, this may help people to start to think more about what they can do in their peer groups, apart from just setting up processes and trying to get their skills better. Important that is, but there are other things. And then I have another idea that comes with this, and that is that people may be a member of 2 or 3 or even 4 different peer groups. Why not? Why not? No reason why not. But then you have this wonderful thing where ideas get cross-fertilized. Somebody goes from one group to another group and says, oh, we were talking about this in our group. This is very... And so in some way, we could become a kind of loose constellation of different peer groups all over the world that have in some way some kind of organic connection with each other. I think that could be very holding of us as a community.
Wow, that would be awesome.
I would never want to make rules, but I think as a suggestion to people, let's all say that we are a member of a peer group, and we all have this understanding that there are other issues we can deal with in our peer group than just practicing the work. Maybe other people have ideas about these issues, but I do think if we don't start to think clearly about issues of quality of practice and ethical considerations, we are going to suddenly find ourselves out on a limb that may break off. We really do, I think, need to start thinking more about these things. Not to say, I'm sure there are many people who are already thinking about them. I just want to put in my thinking about it.
But it's very difficult to put it then into practice, because you have different people having different agendas or different priorities, where they might be joining the group but they're not really attending the sessions, or they might be joining but not being really honest because of different reasons, and or being on different levels where exchange is difficult as well.
So you could have a situation where the peer group then says, you're not turning up.
Yeah.
Why is that? A peer group, to be really successful, needs to have a real commitment to each other. And if the peer group finds that someone doesn't have a commitment, then the group has to think about what they do about that. And the other thing is that such a peer group that goes on for a long period of time develops a tremendously good feeling between them, with each other, and an ability to deal with very complex problems and issues. Yes.
Oh yeah, I hope so too. And what you're saying would be also, if we're talking about real life, a practical way to see, how can we organize each other differently? How can we learn differently from each other? Does it always have to go the same, teacher, student, or, expert, not expert level point of view? So with our work and in our work, we could also try out different working methods and learning methods, which we then also bring back as practical experience and ideas and thoughts to you know, the
Yes.
smaller and wider communities.
Yes. I absolutely agree with you. I would never ever say that I know it all, or that, you know, I have the only ideas. Everybody has ideas. And, you know, if we just maybe light a match, then this will come through, and then someone else somewhere completely different says, well, what about if we do this in the peer group? And that gets disseminated to other peer groups and comes back to me, and I think, oh yes, that's a good idea. Let's do that in my group, and so on.
Yeah, so that is like, you know, that would be in technical terms, deep learning. You know, you can use an artificial intelligence for it, but you can also, I mean, we humans have all these great capabilities which we are not using at all at the moment.
Yes, and that would be, so you've mentioned something else, and that would be in the confines of a reasonably small and manageable peer group. Then people could find, in some ways, the skills that they perhaps don't even realize they have. And so it grows. Yes. I was very hopeful when we put up this website, but I think it's not enough. You know, the IoPT Informed Society's website, it's not enough. It needs more thinking about from the level, actually, of peer groups. It's in the level of the peer group that people will think, actually, we could do this. And why don't we do this? And so on. That's where the creativity can come from. Everybody. Gosh, we've talked a lot.
And it was great. Thank you so much, Vivian. Thank you so much.
It's been delightful. It's what's been really nice for me is and you know, maybe this is the same for everybody in their own little way, in their peer groups and in their work. It's been wonderful for me to have a forum to talk about some of the ideas that I have. And I would like us to have these in peer groups forums for other people to talk about their ideas about how we go forward and how they want to think about themselves as part of the greater whole.
Yeah.
This is very Gestalt thinking.
Yes, because as to use the verb of Gestalt, which just means gestalten, so I can start to it's not create, because create is a bit more maybe, but in the sense of creating something. So gestalten.
Yes. Creating a Gestalt that is vibrant and constantly changing, constantly growing, and alive and lively. Yes. Let's do it.